The sun hung low on the horizon, casting an orange glow over the sprawling military base. Dust swirled in lazy spirals as a convoy of armored vehicles rolled to a stop near the command center. Soldiers moved with purpose, their boots crunching against the gravel path. Among them stood Captain Theo Grayson, a man who had earned his stripes through grit and sheer determination rather than any grand lineage or political favor. He was lean but sturdy, his face marked by faint scars that told stories of battles fought and survived. His dark hair was cropped short, and his piercing blue eyes carried a weight most men couldn't bear. Theo wasn't one for idle chatter. He preferred action over words. But today, even he found himself pausing mid-stride, squinting at the sky. A strange shimmer rippled above the nearby hills, like heat waves dancing on asphalt but far more pronounced. It caught everyone's attention, drawing murmurs from the ranks. Before anyone could speculate further, a blinding flash erupted, forcing Theo to shield his eyes. When the light faded, something, or someone, stood before them. The figure stepped forward, tall and imposing, radiating an aura of authority. She was unlike anything Theo had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with an iridescent hue, shifting between shades of gold and silver as if she were made of starlight itself. Her hair cascaded down her back in waves of liquid platinum, catching the sunlight in ways that seemed almost magical. Her eyes glowed softly, a deep violet that pierced straight through Theo's soul. She wore armor that looked both ancient and futuristic, adorned with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with energy. The air around her crackled with power, making it hard to breathe. Soldiers scrambled into defensive positions, weapons raised, but the woman didn't flinch. Instead, she scanned the group with calm curiosity until her gaze landed squarely on Theo. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, without hesitation, she strode toward him, her movements graceful yet deliberate. The soldiers parted instinctively, unsure whether they should intervene or simply gawk. "My father always talked about you," she said, her voice melodic yet commanding, carrying just a hint of amusement. Theo blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Words failed him, a rarity for someone known for quick thinking under pressure. Around him, whispers erupted among the troops, ranging from disbelief to outright awe. "Who are you?" Theo finally managed, his tone firmer now, though laced with confusion. She tilted her head slightly, studying him as though trying to decipher a puzzle. "General Lyra Valeth," she replied, placing a hand over her chest in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. "Commander of the Celestian Vanguard." The name sent another ripple through the crowd. Celestians were legendary beings whispered about in old war stories, supposedly advanced aliens capable of feats beyond human comprehension. Many dismissed them as myths, bedtime tales spun to inspire hope during bleak times. Yet here she stood, undeniable proof that those legends held some truth. Lyra's lips curved upward in a small smile, as if she could sense the turmoil brewing within Theo's mind. "You may want to lower your weapon," she added lightly, nodding toward the rifle still clutched tightly in his hands. Realizing how tense he must look, Theo slowly lowered the firearm, though his grip remained firm. "Forgive me, General Valeth. We weren't expecting visitors. Not ones like you, anyway." Her laughter was soft, musical, and utterly disarming. "Few ever do. But I assure you, my intentions are peaceful. For now." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. "Your species has intrigued us for centuries. Resilient, resourceful, flawed, yes, but remarkable nonetheless." Theo frowned, processing her statement. "If your people have been watching us all this time, why reveal yourself now?" Lyra's expression shifted, becoming somber. "Because we need your help, and perhaps you need ours." Before Theo could respond, alarms blared across the base, cutting through the tension like a knife. Soldiers snapped to attention, turning their focus toward the source of the disturbance. On the monitors inside the command center, red alerts flashed ominously. Something, or someone, was approaching fast. "What is it?" Theo barked, already moving toward the nearest screen. One of the tech officers pointed at the radar display. "Unknown objects inbound, sir. Multiple signatures, closing rapidly." Lyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes narrowing as she studied the readings. "This complicates things," she muttered under her breath. Without waiting for permission, she reached out and tapped a sequence into the console. Holographic projections flickered to life, displaying detailed scans of the incoming threat. What they revealed left everyone speechless. Dozens of sleek, angular ships streaked across the atmosphere, their designs unmistakably alien but vastly different from Lyra's own vessel. They bristled with weaponry, exuding hostility even from miles away. "They're not mine," Lyra stated flatly, her earlier charm replaced by steely resolve. "These are Drakthar raiders. Ruthless scavengers who thrive on destruction." Theo turned to face her, his jaw tightening. "And you expect us to believe you're here to stop them?" "I don't expect anything," Lyra shot back, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "But make no mistake, Captain Grayson, you'll need every advantage you can get if you hope to survive this." For a brief moment, silence reigned as the gravity of the situation settled over the room. Outside, the first of the enemy ships descended, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire that tore through the perimeter defenses. Chaos erupted instantly, shouts and explosions filling the air. Lyra wasted no time. With a wave of her hand, she summoned a shimmering barrier around the command center, deflecting stray shots and buying them precious seconds. "Your technology is impressive, but it won't hold against them for long," she warned. "We need to act quickly." Theo clenched his fists, torn between skepticism and desperation. "What do you suggest, General?" Her response came swiftly, sharp and decisive. "Trust me, for once in your life." And with that, she took off running, leaving Theo little choice but to follow. As chaos unfolded outside the command center, Theo found himself sprinting alongside General Lyra Valeth, dodging falling debris and bursts of plasma fire. Despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, he couldn't shake the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, partnering with an alien general whose very existence defied logic, while his soldiers scrambled to fend off an invasion force that seemed plucked straight from humanity's darkest nightmares. Lyra, however, appeared unfazed by the madness surrounding them. Her movements were fluid and precise, each step calculated as she led the way toward the armory. "You humans have a peculiar saying," she called over her shoulder, her voice steady despite the cacophony of destruction. "When in doubt, improvise." "Correct," Theo snorted, narrowly avoiding a chunk of burning metal that crashed to the ground beside him. "Yeah, something like that. Though I'm guessing your version involves less running and more shooting lasers out of your eyes." She glanced back at him, her violet eyes twinkling with amusement. "Not quite. But improvisation is universal. Now hurry, we don't have much time." Reaching the armory, Lyra wasted no time examining the rows of weapons lining the walls. She picked up a standard-issue rifle, inspecting it with mild interest before setting it aside. "Primitive," she remarked, though not unkindly. "Effective, but limited." Her gaze drifted to a rack of experimental prototypes stored behind reinforced glass. With a casual flick of her wrist, the lock shattered, and she grabbed one of the sleek devices. "This will do," she said, testing its weight in her hands. Turning to Theo, she tossed him another prototype. "Try not to break it. These are rare, even by your standards." He caught the weapon awkwardly, frowning as he examined the unfamiliar design. "You know, most generals would just give orders instead of handing out gadgets. And most captains wouldn't question their allies during a crisis," she retorted, raising an eyebrow. "Focus, Captain. Humor can wait." With that, she kicked open the door and strode back into the fray, leaving Theo scrambling to keep up. The battlefield was a chaotic mess of smoke, flames, and panicked shouts. Soldiers darted between cover, firing wildly at the advancing Drakthar forces. Their sleek fighters hovered menacingly overhead, raining down destruction with ruthless efficiency. Lyra raised her weapon, aiming with unnatural precision. A single shot erupted from the barrel, releasing a pulse of energy that tore through 3 enemy drones in rapid succession. Theo stared, momentarily stunned, before snapping back to reality. Raising his own prototype, he fired blindly at a group of approaching raiders, surprised when the weapon emitted a high-pitched whine followed by a burst of blue energy. The blast struck true, sending one of the invaders sprawling to the ground. "Not bad," Lyra commented dryly, ducking behind a pile of rubble as a volley of plasma bolts zipped past. "Though I'd aim higher next time. Legs aren't exactly vital to these creatures." Theo grimaced, reloading hastily. "Thanks for the tip. Next time, maybe warn me about aiming for heads instead of legs." She smirked, leaning out briefly to unleash another devastating shot. "Where's the fun in that? Besides, learning on the job is half the experience." Despite the levity in her tone, there was no mistaking the intensity in her actions. Lyra moved like a force of nature, weaving through the battlefield with a grace that bordered on otherworldly. Every movement served a purpose, every decision calculated to maximize impact. Theo found himself marveling at her efficiency, even as he struggled to keep pace. Their progress was interrupted when a massive explosion rocked the area, sending both of them tumbling to the ground. Theo groaned, pushing himself upright just in time to see one of the Dracthyr ships descending directly toward them. Its shadow loomed large, blotting out the sun as cannons whirred to life. "Oh, come on!" Theo shouted, scrambling backward. "Can't we catch a break?" Lyra rolled onto her feet, brushing dust off her armor with an exaggerated flourish. "Patience, Captain. Timing is everything." She extended her hand, palm facing upward, and closed her eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a shimmering orb of energy materialized above her fingertips, growing larger with each passing second. "What are you doing?" Theo demanded, shielding his face as debris rained down around them. "Improvising," she replied simply, her voice calm despite the impending doom bearing down upon them. With a sudden thrust of her arm, she hurled the orb toward the descending ship. It struck the vessel's hull with a deafening crack, causing the entire craft to shudder violently. Sparks erupted from its surface, and within moments, the ship careened off course, crashing into the distance with a thunderous boom. Theo gaped at her, slack-jawed. "Okay, I'll admit, that was impressive." Lyra grinned, clearly enjoying herself. "Impressive? That was textbook. Wait until you see what else I've got planned." Before he could respond, a new threat emerged. A squad of heavily armored Dracthyr warriors charged into view, their weapons trained on the pair. Unlike the drones they had faced earlier, these foes radiated menace, their glowing red eyes fixed unwaveringly on their targets. Lyra sighed dramatically. Of course. Because why wouldn't they send reinforcements? Theo raised his weapon, taking aim. "Any bright ideas, General?" Her grin widened, mischief dancing in her eyes. "Just one. Follow my lead, and try not to die." With that, she launched herself forward, her movements a blur of speed and precision. Theo hesitated only briefly before following suit, plunging headfirst into the fray. Together, they carved through the enemy ranks, their unlikely partnership proving surprisingly effective. Lyra's advanced combat skills combined seamlessly with Theo's raw determination, creating a synergy neither had anticipated. Amid the chaos, Theo couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Lyra commanded the battlefield. There was something mesmerizing about her presence, a magnetic quality that drew others to her side. Even the soldiers fighting alongside them seemed invigorated, rallying around the alien general with newfound vigor. "You really enjoy this, don't you?" Theo shouted, narrowly avoiding a swipe from a Dracthyr blade. Lyra laughed, spinning gracefully to disarm another attacker. "What's not to enjoy? Strategy, teamwork, a touch of chaos. It's exhilarating." Theo shook his head, firing off another shot. "You're insane." "Perhaps," she admitted, dispatching two more enemies with a single blow. But insanity often makes the best stories. As the battle raged on, Theo began to realize that Lyra wasn't just fighting alongside him, she was teaching him. Each move she made carried lessons, subtle hints designed to push him beyond his limits. Whether intentional or not, her guidance was invaluable, transforming the overwhelming odds into manageable challenges. By the time the immediate threat subsided, both Theo and Lyra were battered but alive. Breathing heavily, Theo leaned against a crumbling wall, staring at the alien general with newfound respect. You're full of surprises, aren't you? Lyra smirked, wiping soot from her cheek. You haven't seen anything yet, Captain. This is only the beginning. Her words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Somewhere in the distance, the sounds of renewed conflict echoed, reminding them that the fight was far from over. But for now, they stood together, united by circumstance and bound by a shared determination to survive. As the dust settled from the initial skirmish, Theo and Lyra regrouped with what remained of the human forces. The scene was grim. Smoldering wreckage littered the landscape, and the acrid smell of burnt metal filled the air. Soldiers tended to the wounded, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Despite the mounting losses, a flicker of defiance burned in their eyes. They had survived this long against impossible odds, and they weren't about to give up now. Lyra surveyed the survivors with a mixture of admiration and concern. Your people are resilient, she remarked, her voice softer than usual. But resilience alone won't win this war. Theo nodded grimly, his gaze scanning the horizon. More Dracthyr ships were visible in the distance, their ominous silhouettes blotting out patches of sky. We need a plan. Something big enough to turn the tide. Lyra crossed her arms, her brow furrowing in thought. There's a weakness in their fleet, a central command ship. If we can disable it, the rest of their forces will falter. That sounds simple enough, Theo replied dryly. Except for the part where we're outnumbered and outgunned. She gave him a wry smile. Simple doesn't mean easy. But desperate times call for bold moves. Turning to address the gathered soldiers, Lyra projected her voice with authority. Listen carefully. The enemy relies on coordination. Take out their leader, and their unity crumbles. We'll strike at their heart, a direct assault on their command ship. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, others inspired. One soldier stepped forward, his uniform singed but his stance resolute. How do you propose we get close enough to hit their flagship? Those bastards will tear us apart before we even reach orbit. Lyra's expression hardened. That's where strategy comes in. We'll use their arrogance against them. Feign retreat, draw them into pursuit, then ambush them from multiple angles. Divide and conquer. Theo chimed in, pacing in front of the group. It's risky, but it might work. We'll split into teams. Lyra and I will take point, leading the charge toward the command ship. The rest of you provide cover and create diversions. Make sure they think we're scattering. A young private raised her hand hesitantly. What happens if the plan fails? What if they overwhelm us? Lyra met her gaze steadily. Then we fight until our last breath. But failure isn't an option, not today. Her words carried a weight that silenced any further objections. Preparations began immediately. Engineers worked tirelessly to retrofit remaining vehicles and aircraft, equipping them with whatever makeshift defenses they could muster. Supplies were distributed, weapons checked, and final briefings conducted. The mood was somber yet electric, a blend of dread and determination that bonded the group tighter than ever. As night fell, the makeshift fleet assembled on the edge of the battlefield. Pilots climbed into cockpits, engines roared to life, and soldiers loaded into transport shuttles. Lyra stood at the forefront, her shimmering armor glowing faintly under the moonlight. Beside her, Theo adjusted his helmet, checking his weapon one last time. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice low. She glanced at him, her violet eyes reflecting the stars above. "Are you?" He chuckled nervously. "Honestly? No. But since when has that stopped us?" Her smile was fleeting but genuine. "Exactly." With a signal from Lyra, the operation commenced. The first wave of decoys launched skyward, deliberately broadcasting weak signals to lure the Dracthyr ships into pursuit. As expected, the enemy took the bait, breaking formation to chase the fleeing vessels. Meanwhile, Theo and Lyra led the main assault team, slipping through the chaos undetected aboard a cloaked shuttle. Inside the cramped cockpit, tension crackled like static electricity. Theo gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white as he navigated treacherous airspace. Behind him, a small contingent of elite soldiers prepared for the inevitable confrontation ahead. Lyra sat co-pilot, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface, monitoring the enemy's movements. "They're splitting off," she reported, her tone clinical. "Good. Keep heading northeast. Stay low to avoid detection." Theo nodded, adjusting their trajectory accordingly. Below, the terrain blurred past in shades of gray and black, illuminated only by sporadic flashes of distant explosions. The silence inside the shuttle was oppressive, broken only by the hum of engines and occasional updates from Lyra. Suddenly, alarms blared, startling everyone. "We've been spotted," one of the soldiers shouted, pointing at a cluster of red dots converging on their position. Lyra cursed under her breath, her fingers flying across the console. "They're locking onto us. Brace for impact." The shuttle shuddered violently as plasma bolts struck its shields, sending sparks flying. Theo wrestled with the controls, struggling to maintain stability. "Hold on tight," he yelled, banking sharply to evade incoming fire. Explosions lit up the sky as support units engaged the pursuing ships, buying precious seconds for the assault team. Through the chaos, Lyra maintained her composure, issuing rapid-fire commands. "Adjust shield frequencies. Deploy countermeasures. And for heaven's sake, Theo, keep us airborne." "I'm trying," he shot back, sweat dripping down his face. Another bolt grazed the shuttle, rocking it dangerously. "We're not going to make it unless we do something drastic." Lyra hesitated, then nodded decisively. "Fine. Do it." Without hesitation, Theo activated the shuttle's experimental EMP generator, unleashing a pulse of electromagnetic energy that temporarily disabled nearby enemy systems. The pursuing ships faltered, giving the team a narrow window to escape. "We're clear for now," Lyra announced, exhaling sharply. "But they'll recover soon. We need to move faster." Theo pushed the throttle to maximum, hurtling toward the looming silhouette of the Drakther command ship. It loomed larger with each passing second, a monolithic fortress bristling with weapons and defenses. Landing unnoticed would be nearly impossible, but they had no other choice. As they approached, Lyra turned to the soldiers, her expression fierce. "This is it. Once we disembark, there's no turning back. Stick to the plan, watch each other's backs, and remember, this isn't just about survival. It's about showing them we won't go down without a fight." The soldiers nodded, gripping their weapons tightly. Theo locked eyes with Lyra one last time, silently communicating everything they couldn't put into words. Fear, resolve, trust, all mingled in that brief moment. "Let's finish this," he said firmly, guiding the shuttle toward the belly of the beast. With a jarring thud, they landed, hidden within the shadows of the massive vessel. The hatch hissed open, revealing a labyrinth of corridors bathed in eerie green light. Lyra stepped out first, her weapon drawn and ready. Theo followed closely, flanked by the rest of the team. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the command ship, locate the central control hub, and disable it. Simple in theory, nearly suicidal in practice. But as they moved deeper into enemy territory, Theo realized something crucial. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not because the danger had lessened, but because he trusted the person beside him. Together, they ventured into the unknown, prepared to face whatever horrors awaited them. The corridors of the Drakther command ship were eerily silent, save for the faint hum of machinery and the occasional echo of distant footsteps. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by the flickering green lights overhead. Lyra led the way, her glowing eyes scanning every corner with practiced precision. Behind her, Theo and the others moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. "This place gives me the creeps," one of the soldiers muttered under his breath, clutching his rifle tightly. Lyra glanced back, her expression unreadable. "It's designed to intimidate. Don't let it get to you." Easier said than done, Theo thought, suppressing a shiver. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the ship itself were alive and watching their every move. Still, he forced himself to focus. Distraction here meant death. They rounded a corner, and Lyra held up a fist, signaling the group to halt. Ahead, two Drakther guards stood posted outside a reinforced door, their weapons gleaming ominously. She gestured silently, assigning roles to each member of the team. Theo nodded, understanding his task. Slowly, they spread out, positioning themselves for the ambush. Lyra struck first, her movements fluid and silent. In an instant, she disarmed one guard with a swift kick, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. Before the second could react, Theo lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The rest of the team subdued the pair quickly, binding them with makeshift restraints. "Nice work," Lyra whispered, her approval evident despite the urgency. "Now let's see what's behind this door." Using a device salvaged from the shuttle, she interfaced with the locking mechanism. After a tense moment, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with pulsating machinery. At the center stood a towering console, surrounded by holographic displays that flickered erratically. This was it, the nerve center of the entire fleet. "Everyone, stay alert," Lyra ordered, stepping inside. "We don't know how many more are lurking around." Theo kept close, his senses on high alert. The room seemed deserted, but appearances could be deceiving. As Lyra approached the console, her fingers moved rapidly over the interface, bypassing security protocols with ease. Data streamed across the screens, revealing schematics and communication logs. "There," she said triumphantly, isolating a critical subroutine. "If we disable this, it'll sever their command structure. But we'll need a few minutes to complete the process." "Minutes we might not have," Theo pointed out, glancing nervously at the entrance. Sure enough, the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, accompanied by guttural voices speaking in harsh tones. "We're about to have company," he warned, raising his weapon. Lyra didn't hesitate. "Hold them off. I'll finish this." The team sprang into action, forming a defensive perimeter around her. Moments later, a swarm of Dracthyr warriors burst into the room, their weapons blazing. Plasma bolts ricocheted off walls and consoles, filling the air with sparks and smoke. Theo fired repeatedly, his aim steady despite the chaos. Beside him, the soldiers fought valiantly, holding their ground against overwhelming numbers. Lyra remained focused, her hands moving with mechanical precision as she worked to disable the system. "How much longer?" Theo shouted, ducking behind cover as a bolt narrowly missed his head. "Almost there," she replied, her voice strained but determined. Sweat beaded on her forehead, evidence of the immense concentration required for such a delicate task. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the chamber, throwing everyone off balance. Part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the entrance and trapping them inside. Panic surged through the group, but Lyra remained calm. "Don't stop fighting," she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "We're too close to fail now." Inspired by her resolve, the soldiers redoubled their efforts, pushing back the relentless tide of enemies. Theo spotted a particularly aggressive warrior charging toward Lyra, intent on stopping her. Without thinking, he intercepted the attacker, grappling with him in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle. The Dracthyr was stronger, its claws slicing through Theo's armor, but he refused to yield. Summoning every ounce of strength, he slammed the creature into a nearby console, rendering it unconscious. Panting heavily, Theo turned back to Lyra just in time to hear her shout, "Done!" The room plunged into darkness as the central system powered down, plunging the entire ship into disarray. Alarms blared, and the remaining Dracthyr warriors faltered, their coordination shattered. "We did it," Theo breathed, relief washing over him. But Lyra shook her head, her expression grim. "Not yet. We still need to get out of here." As if on cue, the ground trembled violently, signaling the ship's imminent collapse. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, and sparks showered from damaged conduits. The team scrambled toward the exit, navigating the treacherous terrain with desperate haste. Reaching the blocked doorway, Lyra pressed her palms against the debris, channeling her energy to clear a path. With a final surge of effort, the rubble exploded outward, allowing them to escape into the corridor beyond. "Move," she urged, leading the way at a breakneck pace. Behind them, the chamber imploded, sealing off the heart of the Dracthyr fleet. They sprinted through the labyrinthine halls, guided by Lyra's uncanny sense of direction. Explosions continued to rock the ship, threatening to consume them at every turn. Finally, they reached the hangar bay, where their shuttle waited, miraculously intact. Go, 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 Theo shouted, ushering the team aboard. Lyra leapt into the cockpit, firing up the engines as the rest secured themselves inside. With a roar, the shuttle lifted off, racing toward the gaping hole that had once been the hangar doors. Fiery tendrils licked at their heels as the command ship began its descent, plummeting toward the planet below. For a moment, Theo allowed himself to relax, collapsing into a seat as the shuttle broke free of the doomed vessel. Around him, the soldiers cheered, their victory hard-earned and sweet. But Lyra remained silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's not over," she said quietly, her voice tinged with sadness. "The Dracthyr will regroup. And when they do—" Theo placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "Then we'll be ready. Together." Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed a deeper sorrow. "Together," she agreed, steering the shuttle toward home. The aftermath of the battle left scars, both physical and emotional. The human base was in ruins, and though the Dracthyr fleet had been crippled, the cost had been high. Soldiers mourned their fallen comrades, and survivors worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost. Amid the chaos, Theo found himself reflecting on everything that had transpired. Lyra's presence lingered everywhere he went, her leadership and bravery having inspired even the most hardened veterans. Yet, despite her outward composure, he noticed something different about her, a quiet vulnerability she rarely allowed others to see. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Theo sought her out. He found her standing alone at the edge of a newly constructed observation deck, gazing up at the stars. Her armor was gone, replaced by a simple yet elegant tunic that shimmered faintly under the fading light. For once, she wasn't strategizing or commanding. She was simply still. "You look like you have something on your mind," Theo said softly, approaching her cautiously. Lyra turned slightly, her violet eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "And here I thought I was being subtle." He chuckled, leaning against the railing beside her. "Subtlety isn't really your style, General." She smiled faintly but didn't respond immediately. Instead, her gaze drifted back to the heavens above. After a moment, she spoke, her voice tinged with melancholy. "Do you ever wonder if we're meant for more than this? Constant battles, endless struggles. Is there room for peace in all of it?" Theo considered her question carefully. "I think peace is worth fighting for. But sometimes, I wonder too. Maybe happiness doesn't come from winning wars, it comes from finding moments between them." Her expression softened, and for the first time, Theo saw a glimpse of the woman behind the warrior. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing some invisible burden. "You humans have an interesting way of looking at things. Moments between the chaos." "Speaking of which," Theo began, shifting uncomfortably. He hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject weighing heavily on his mind. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." Lyra raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, this sounds serious." "It is." He straightened, turning to face her fully. Taking a deep breath, he continued, "Lyra, over these past weeks, and especially during that mission, I realized something. You're not just an incredible leader or a brilliant tactician. You're someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who makes me believe in impossible things." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her features. "Theo." "I know we're different," he pressed on, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "Different worlds, different lives. But none of that matters when I'm with you. So, will you give us a chance? A real one?" For a long moment, Lyra simply stared at him, her emotions unreadable. Then, to his relief, a smile broke across her face, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire being. "You ridiculous human," she murmured, shaking her head. "Of course I will." Theo let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Before he could say anything else, Lyra stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek. Her touch was warm, grounding him in a way nothing else ever had. "You should know," she added, her tone playful yet sincere, That Celestians don't do things halfway. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. What does properly entail? He asked, grinning despite himself. Her smile turned mischievous. Well, for starters, a proper proposal. And perhaps a wedding that involves both our people. No pressure, of course. Of course, Theo echoed, laughing. Anything else? She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. A lifetime together. No backing out, no excuses. Deal. Deal, he replied without hesitation, pulling her into an embrace. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the weight of the world seemed to lift, if only for a moment. Months passed, and preparations for the wedding became a monumental undertaking. Both human and Celestian cultures were rich and deeply rooted, so blending traditions required creativity, and plenty of compromise. The ceremony itself took place on a remote planet known for its breathtaking landscapes, chosen because it held significance for both species. Rolling fields of luminescent grass stretched as far as the eye could see, while twin moons hung low in the twilight sky, casting a soft glow over the gathering. Guests arrived from across galaxies, some traveling light years to witness the union. Humans marveled at the ethereal beauty of the Celestians, while the latter expressed fascination with Earth's customs. Music filled the air, a harmonious blend of alien instruments and human melodies. Laughter and cheers echoed through the valley as friends and allies celebrated the unlikely bond between two worlds. When Theo and Lyra finally exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the attendees. Theo's heartfelt declaration of love brought tears to even the stoic soldiers, while Lyra's poetic promise of loyalty moved many to applause. As they sealed their commitment with a kiss on head, fireworks erupted overhead, Celestian energy bursts intertwined with human pyrotechnics, creating a dazzling display that symbolized unity and hope. Afterward, the festivities carried on late into the night. Food stalls offered delicacies from both cultures, ranging from traditional Earth dishes to exotic Celestian treats that shimmered like liquid starlight. Dancing ensued, with guests attempting, and often failing hilariously, to master unfamiliar steps. Through it all, Theo and Lyra remained at the center, their joy infectious and undeniable. Years later, the couple settled into a life neither had anticipated but both cherished deeply. They built a home on a tranquil moon orbiting a distant star, where rolling hills met crystalline lakes. Their children, two spirited boys and a curious girl, grew up surrounded by stories of courage, adventure, and love. The boys inherited Theo's determination and quick wit, while the girl possessed Lyra's grace and wisdom. Together, they formed a family unlike any other, bridging the gap between humanity and the Celestian vanguard. Theo often joked that raising kids with Lyra was its own kind of battlefield, given her penchant for perfectionism and his occasional lapses in discipline. But beneath the teasing lay a profound gratitude for the life they shared, the challenges they'd overcome, and the future they were building together. As they watched their children play under the twin moons one evening, Lyra rested her head on Theo's shoulder. "Do you remember when you asked me if there's room for peace in all the chaos?" He nodded, wrapping an arm around her. "Yeah. Why?" She smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the stars above. "I think we found our answer." And as they sat there, bathed in the gentle light of their adopted world, it was clear that their story wasn't just about survival or victory. It was about connection, the kind that transcended boundaries, defied expectations, and created something beautiful from the ashes of war. Together, Theo and Lyra had forged a legacy not of conquest, but of love. And in doing so, they proved that even in the vastness of the universe, the smallest moments could hold the greatest meaning.